Despite High Voltage's best efforts, the Conduit was dragged down by its frustrating level design and hardware limitations. Even with its setbacks, the Conduit had left a strong impression on me, wishing for more and hoping that High Voltage could improve their Wii exclusive FPS in a sequel. And did they succeed in the Conduit 2? Honestly, yeah, I think they did across the board. High Voltage improved its story, graphics, gameplay, and added even new features that made me appreciate the effort put into creating the Conduit 2. Now, compared to the first game, this story is more engaging and dynamic. However, there is something I want to make clear. Unless you 100% paid attention to lore and found all the secrets in the first game, you may be a little lost. To summarize the basic lore in Conduit 2, Prometheus and John Adams, who is in disguise, are from an alien species called progenitors. Including Prometheus and Adams, there are several other progenitors based all over the world, controlling various countries over the past couple hundred years. And 2, I will be revealing some spoilers in the plot because it does affect my opinions on the gameplay. We start immediately where the first Conduit left us off, having Michael Ford stepping through a conduit in the Trust HQ hunting down John Adams. Michael arrives on a Trust base disguised as an oil rig positioned over the long-lost city of Atlantis. After John Adams escapes, Michael battles the monstrous Atlantean Guardian, the Leviathan, by jumping from one turret to the next. Waking up in the depths of Atlantis, Prometheus guides Michael through the standing ruins of Atlantis, upgrading his trust suit and waking up his new ally from stasis, Andromeda.
Prometheus! Show yourself, you traitor!
It might be a good idea not to mention my presence right now.
Despite her anger towards Prometheus, Andromeda still assists Michael in defeating John Adams by running the base operations in Atlantis and operating the main conduits. Once Atlantis is back and running, Prometheus explains to Michael that Adams is hunting the remaining progenitors to absorb their powers. So it is a race against time to warn the remaining free progenitors about Adams and to convince them to join forces with you. This does not go as smoothly as Michael or Prometheus had hoped, however. The progenitor based in China named Li is arrogant and would not listen to anything Michael had to say and challenges Michael to a duel. Forced into combat, Michael defeats Li, and Prometheus then instructs Michael to absorb Li's power into the ASE. However, this makes him feel rather uncomfortable.
The ASE can absorb the energies of the progenitors, whether alive or dead, making it, and therefore you, more powerful.
What? So we're doing the same thing Adams is doing?
Yes, but we are doing it for the right reasons.
With one progenitor down, they then head to Siberia to rescue another progenitor named Katerina, who had been captured by the Trust. During your travels, Michael finds that a significant portion of the Drudge population is rebelling against the Trust, thanks to Michael destroying the Trust HQ in Washington, D.C. Michael and the Free Drudge work together to save Katerina. Unfortunately, her wounds are too significant and Michael is forced to absorb her powers as well. Then, making a quick pit stop in the Amazon, Michael finds a deceased progenitor and absorbs their power into the ASE as well. Then, without much warning, Prometheus then transfers the power of the other progenitors and himself from the ASE into Michael's suit. Now, Michael can no longer communicate with Prometheus. Once Michael returns to Atlantis, Andromeda warns him that John Adams and a task force have infiltrated their base. Fighting John Adams, Michael damages him enough to reveal his true form. Changing locations, Michael finally finishes off Adams and then absorbs the consciousness of Adams and the other half-dozen progenitors that Adam had killed in the past. This awakens the ASE, alerting a large spacecraft and activating a gigantic conduit with, I shit you not, George Washington and Abraham Lincoln in destroyer suits. It's clear that there is a larger threat and that Michael Ford's greatest battle is yet to come. I enjoyed the Conduit story way more than the original, but I have some issues with how the characters were rewritten. I had fun moving from story beat to story beat, I loved the set pieces that were located in all the different countries, and I appreciated the in-engine and pre-rendered cutscenes. They are much better to experience than the static in-between mission exposition dumps from the first game. Side characters like the Free Drudge were interesting, and Andromeda brings a fresh perspective to established characters like Prometheus and Adams. Up until meeting Andromeda, you could only go on what you gathered from the first game and what Prometheus would reveal about himself and Adams. This does make you question how reliable Prometheus is as a source of information, but only to a slight degree. From Michael's perspective, his relationship with Prometheus doesn't waver at any point in the campaign.
So, what's up with you and Andromeda? In the middle of some kind of 1,000-year-old lovers' quarrel?
Ages ago, Andromeda fought beside me. She was an incredible warrior. Loyal, brave, but foolish. She believes I betrayed her.
Voice actors were changed for Michael Ford, Prometheus, and Adams. This is a slight change that takes me out of the experience, but this is nothing compared to the character whiplash I experienced with how Michael Ford was rewritten.
That's Andromeda? Damn. Andromeda is a stone-cold fox.
Michael Ford didn't have much of personality from the first game, but there was enough established that could have been expanded on. In the first game, he came across as professional, vigilant, and serious because he was an on-the-field CIA operative, not this lighthearted teen who was thrown into a powered bodysuit.
Cool duds.
I mean, 15 minutes before hitting on Andromeda, Michael was told by Adams his whole family was murdered in DC.
Pity you couldn't come to grips with this before you forced me to obliterate the city, including your family, if I'm not mistaken.
You monster. I'll kill you!
It just doesn't line up with the seriousness of the plot, not to mention inserting these cheesy one-liners.
I always knew my video game skills would come in handy someday.
What you need to do is think of Michael as two entirely different characters from the first and second games. When I took that into account and realized I was experiencing a human-alien buddy cop video game, I did wind up enjoying Michael more and how he interacted with other characters.
Yeah, alright, Othu. I'm on it.
Thank you, Liberator! The time of our freedom is at hand!
No more suicide missions, you hear?
And even though the ending is absurdly stupid, I was still hooked and kind of stoked to see where this story was going. I mean, how could anyone not be interested in a third Conduit game after seeing Washington and Lincoln in destroyer suits? The Conduit does a much better job of forming its identity compared to Halo. The further I went into the campaign, the less I associated plots between the two.
It could have been anyone, but it was you.
They let me pick. Did I ever tell you that?
Look, I said a better job, not a perfect job, okay? Now, I wasn't too impressed with what I saw from the first Conduit. I thought that overall, it looked visually similar to other titles like the COD ports on the Wii. The overall aesthetic was dark, gray, and brown and didn't really stand out. Not to mention the frame rate would get destroyed. It was clear that the Wii could not handle the Quantum 3 engine pushing the hardware of the system. The Conduit 2 is a definite improvement. I was initially concerned during the first mission being within a dark oil rig at night, but I gotta say I was excited with the various settings you get to explore. I loved the bright and vivid levels that were in China, the Amazon, and even revisiting Washington, DC. I was more invested in the world, and I didn't mind sightseeing when I had the chance. Models and enemies have been given a considerable makeover and look much better than in the Conduit. Drudge soldiers have been enhanced and cleaned up, and you can definitely appreciate the in-game models now that the Drudge are Michael Ford's allies. And I won't lie, I do like the Destroyer armor design. It makes me think of combining Master Chief's and the Arbiter's armor from Halo 2 and 3. Overall, it was clear that High Voltage was more familiar with the Quantum 3 engine, and it was better optimized for the system. Gameplay was much smoother, and I was genuinely pleased when I was experiencing 60 frames per second. But it was not locked, unfortunately. There were definite frame dips in busy environments, such as in Atlantis and in Siberia. But it was never as bad in the first Conduit. Like the first Conduit, you still have lots of control settings and options, but this now includes using Wii Motion Plus and the Wii Classic Controller Pro. I'm glad that 2 analog sticks were given as a choice, since this would allow a larger fan base to play who may have disliked being forced to use motion controls. The Conduit 2 has a nice mix of level design using both linear and sandbox concepts. In linear levels, there are a couple of paths Michael can take to enter various rooms and approach enemies. This allows gameplay to stay fresh as enemies can react differently to how Michael enters a room. Sandbox missions are more geared toward the exploration of hunting down secret messages and collectibles. Thankfully, High Voltage removed most of the bad level design from the first game, Ghost mines had been removed, and there was not one instance of being trapped in a room and being forced to activate biolocks. Enemies like crawlers and healers have been reduced significantly, being restricted to 1 or 2 portions of a level. But there are a couple of fast-moving robotic enemies that can be frustrating to fight, especially in groups. But now with less annoying gameplay elements, exploration felt much more encouraged and rewarding. All weapons now have alternating fire modes. This can range from Michael looking down an iron sight or scope, single fire to full auto,
Well, Mr. Ford, my work here is complete.
and target tracking bullets. And I have to admit that the new Trust weapons are pretty awesome. There is the ARC, which can turn Michael invisible. This weapon has unlimited ammo, but it works off the weapon's temperature. Shoot too much, the weapon overheats and needs to cool. Stay invisible too long, and the rifle freezes. During more difficult firefights, I would almost overheat the rifle, allowing me to stay invisible longer and have a tactical advantage over the enemies in a room. And another favorite was the auto-tune rifle, which could shoot enemies behind cover, and this concept was done before Black Ops 2. I never wanted to stick with one weapon for too long because each felt useful and fun to equip. Weapon selection was also encouraged since in the Atlantis hub world, Michael Ford had access to a weapon foundry. This allows you to create a unique class before going to the next level. This included perks that affect weapon damage output, movement speed, and damage reduction. Weapons and perks could be unlocked by scanning blueprints and spending energy credits. Post-game content allows replayability, letting you replay missions where you missed possible items to scan and unlock more perks and weapons. Boss fights are new to the Conduit, and I find it to be a weak point in the campaign. I didn't feel like Michael Ford was agile enough to avoid Lee or Adams when they would charge and attack. Michael felt too slow and didn't have enough stamina. Also, with either the Hive Cannon or Rocket Launcher, it felt like I cheesed what was supposed to be climatic events. The turret fights are fun though, with the Havoc fight being my favorite. There was some strategy determining when to either shoot or use my shields to protect my gunship's integrity. Compared to the Conduit, the ASC took a major step back in terms of gameplay and story importance. In the first game, everyone was after the ASC, but now the ASC has been reduced to a simple sonar device revealing hidden items and holding B to unlock a door or hack a computer. I was hoping it would do more like scan enemies and a few other items and environments to better flesh out the world Michael Ford interacts with. It felt too surface level and something that helps the Conduit's main draw in being unique from other games. And last, it feels like there was a missed opportunity with having Michael collect the consciousness of the other progenitors as well as the destroyer suit. It does nothing to the gameplay. Even though Prometheus adds their powers to Michael in a cutscene, he isn't given further abilities even though it's heavily implied.
Mr. Ford, you know full well progenitors can sense each other, and I sense no less than 3 of them coming from inside you.
Oh yeah?
I wish you could have used the ASC as a source to switch between the abilities of the progenitors. Michael could have used an interface similar to the power suits in Crisis. Like, Lee could enhance Michael's strength and speed, Katarina could have been more adept with telekinesis maybe, but this was something that High Voltage probably had thought about, but maybe they scrapped the idea since they had the weapon foundry, which included perks. And the same goes for the destroyer suit as well. I can't say that there's a difference between before and after Michael is given this upgrade. In the first Conduit, you're given the Trust suit and you appreciate the features like recharging health and higher jumping after a couple of missions relying on health packs. It feels too surface level and just an aesthetic change. The Conduit 2 has welcome features like a local split screen multiplayer for you and your friends to play against each other or join forces in a horde mode. In multiplayer and horde mode, you can create an avatar with a surprisingly large selection of characters like Drudge, Destroyer, or Trust agents. Each character has unique armor pieces and color selection that I honestly did not expect from a Wii game. This is a level of selection I had only associated with Halo Reach and ODST. More gear, perks, and weapons can be unlocked with energy credits you earned from in-game achievements, but you are now limited with how many you can collect since many are associated with online multiplayer. That said, Horde mode is surprisingly fun and I would definitely try this mode out by playing locally with my friends today. The enemy count is a little low since it might be all the Wii can handle, but it could be more fast-paced with another player involved. I'm just glad High Voltage had the foresight to include modes not dependent on Nintendo's online service and keep this game alive. First and foremost, I believe that the Conduit 2 is not just a good FPS for a Wii game. I think it's a good FPS title. High Voltage not only succeeded in improving many aspects where the Conduit failed, but brought several new features that had me wanting more. As of today, I think I played through the campaign at least 3 times, which is way more than what I could handle in the first Conduit. All around, it's a much better experience with a more entertaining and engaging story, fun weapons to use in unique loadouts, and a fun local multiplayer to try with friends. I wish that there could have been a third Conduit. First, to finish the story because we were given the craziest cliffhanger I've ever experienced, and second, to provide players with a serious FPS exclusive for hardcore Nintendo fans. The Conduit 2 provided people with this opportunity as there was an online experience that stayed kicking after its initial launch. Sure, there are titles now like Splatoon to fill in that gap, and third-party titles like Overwatch, but I think the Switch has a large enough base that something unique to the system could be an awesome opportunity that the Conduit could fulfill. At this point, I just wish the Conduit series could be re-released with updated controls and graphical enhancements. I think trying to reintroduce the series to a new generation would be a great way to test the waters, similar to dropping Metroid Prime, but it's highly unlikely this will happen, especially now that Microsoft and Nintendo have signed a 10-year legal agreement to bring COD to Nintendo players. Not necessarily bad news for Nintendo, but it feels like any chance of the Conduit coming back won't happen. Now, with all that said and done, I'm giving the Conduit 2 a 7.5. out of 10. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. If you liked what you saw, please comment, like, and subscribe. Any little bit helps out this small channel, and I truly appreciate it. My name is Birkey, and see what's in my corner next time.